The first cruel laugh cut through the ballroom like a whip. "Nobody wants a cripple," her sister Gwen hissed behind her fan, loud enough for half the ballroom to hear. "Look at her, limping in like a broken doll. Who would ever choose that?" Gianna's cheeks burned, but she kept her chin high, fingers tightening around the silver cane that had become both crutch and armor these past 3 years. The delicate silk of her midnight blue gown whispered against the marble as she took another careful step, the old injury in her left leg flaring with every shift of weight. She could feel the stares, pity from some, mockery from most. At 24, she was already the forgotten daughter of House Foster, the one whose riding accident had stolen more than her grace. It had stolen her future. What no one in that glittering hall knew was that the Alpha King had been watching her since the moment she entered, and the secret he carried would make Gwen's laughter choke into silence before the night was done. Gianna focused on the rhythm of her cane against the polished floor. Tap, step, tap, step, willing her face into the cool mask she'd perfected since the accident. The ballroom of Blackthorn Keep stretched endlessly before her, crystal chandeliers dripping golden light over gowns of emerald, crimson, and pearl. Laughter and the scent of jasmine thickened the air, but beneath it all lay the sharper musk of alphas, power, dominance, barely leashed hunger. She had not wanted to come. Her father had insisted. "One last season, Gianna. Show them you are still a Foster." Gwen had smirked the entire carriage ride, her own gown a confection of silver. Perfect, unmarked, everything Gianna once was. Now Gwen's voice carried again, sweeter this time for the benefit of Lord Merrick at her side. "Poor thing. She tries so hard. But after what that stallion did to her leg, well, some flowers are simply meant to wilt quietly." Heat prickled behind Gianna's eyes, but she did not flinch. She reached the edge of the dance floor and paused, letting the crowd swirl around her like a river parting around stone. No one asked her to dance. No one ever did anymore. Instead, she watched her younger sister glide into the arms of yet another suitor, Gwen's laugh sparkling like the diamonds at her throat. Gianna's chest tightened with something sharper than envy. Resignation, maybe. She had accepted her place long ago, the supportive sister, the quiet healer of the household, the one who would never bear the next alpha heir. At least her hands still worked. At least she could still mix tinctures that eased fevers and mend wounds when the village needed her. Small mercies. A low murmur rippled through the room. Heads turned toward the grand staircase at the far end. The music did not falter, but the energy shifted, charged, electric. He had arrived. King Heath Valtor descended the steps like a controlled storm, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in formal black leathers edged with silver wolf runes. His hair was the deep black of a moonless night, falling just past his collar, and his eyes, those piercing storm-gray eyes, swept the room with the intensity of a predator. At 28, he was the youngest Alpha King in 3 centuries to hold the fractured realms together by sheer will and claw, unmated, unyielding, whispered to have rejected every noble daughter thrust before him. Gianna's breath caught despite herself. She had seen him once before, years ago, before her accident, passing through their lands on a border tour. He had been distant then, a figure on horseback. Now he was close enough that she could smell the wild pine and thunder of his scent even across the ballroom. Heath's gaze moved slowly, deliberately, over the assembled nobility. Gwen straightened, tilting her head just so, lips curving into her most alluring smile. Several other ladies did the same, a subtle ripple of perfume and expectation. His eyes kept moving, until they stopped on Gianna. For one suspended heartbeat, the entire world narrowed to that storm-gray stare locked on hers. Gianna's stomach dropped. She could already feel it coming. He would see the cane, the awkward tilt of her body, the way her left leg refused to obey, and that sharp hunger in his eyes would twist into pity. Or worse, amusement. but his gaze didn't flicker with disgust. It didn't soften with sympathy either. Instead, it burned, raw, intent with curiosity. His jaw tightened, then he began to walk, straight toward her. The crowd parted instinctively. Whispers erupted like sparks. Gwen's fan froze mid-wave, her perfect smile cracking at the edges. Gianna gripped her cane harder, hyper-aware of every imperfection on her body. This had to be a mistake, a cruel jest. Kings did not cross ballrooms for crippled daughters of minor houses, yet he kept coming, each step measured, but powerful, until he stood before her, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. Pine and winter wind wrapped around her, threading through her like a promise. "Lady Gianna Foster," he said, carrying just enough alpha resonance to make her knees want to buckle for reasons that had nothing to do with injury. "May I have this dance?" The question hung in the sudden hush. Somewhere behind her, Gwen made a small, strangled sound. Gianna's throat worked. "Your Majesty, I cannot dance." A faint smile ghosted across his lips, there and gone, but it transformed the harsh lines of his face into something unbearably beautiful. "Then we can simply stand together while the music plays, unless you would rather I carry you." Heat flooded her face. That would cause a scandal. "Good," he murmured, so softly only she could hear. "I have been waiting for a reason to cause one." Before she could form a reply, he extended his hand, palm up, calloused from sword and rein, steady as stone. Gianna stared at it. Her mind hissed warnings. "This changes nothing. He will see how broken you are the moment you move. Gwen will never let you forget this humiliation." But beneath the fear, something ancient and reckless stirred, something that had been sleeping since the day the stallion threw her and left her screaming in the mud. She placed her hand in his. The moment their skin touched, warmth surged up her arm like liquid sunlight. The constant throb in her leg eased slightly, just enough to steal her breath. Heath's fingers closed gently around hers, thumb brushing once across her knuckles. He did not pull her onto the floor. Instead, he drew her to the side, set near a tall, arched window where moonlight spilled silver across the stone. The orchestra shifted into a slower, more intimate waltz. Couples swirled past, but Gianna felt none of it. Only the solid warmth of his presence, the way he positioned himself to shield her from the worst of the stares. "You are staring," she whispered, cheeks still burning. "I am looking," he corrected with a small smile. "Why?" The word slipped out before she could cage it. "There are a dozen perfect omegas here tonight. My sister..." "Your sister laughs too loudly and smells of desperation." His gaze never left hers. You are someone I have been searching for longer than you can imagine." Gianna's pulse stuttered. "You do not know me, Your Majesty. I know enough." His free hand lifted, slowly, as giving her time to pull away, and brushed a stray lock of her auburn hair behind her ear. The touch sent sparks racing across her skin. "I know you walked in here tonight despite every reason not to. I know pain lives in your eyes but has not won, and I know that 3 years ago, when I rode through your lands, a girl with fire in her step handed me a water skin and told me my horse looked thirsty." Memory slammed into her. Hot summer day, dust on her boots, the tall king on his black warhorse. She had been 21, fearless before her cripple. "You remember that?" "I have remembered little else since the night your accident reached my ears." His voice dropped lower, edged with something raw. "I sent healers. They were turned away at your father's gate. I sent inquiries. They were politely ignored. I have waited, Gianna, longer than is wise for a king." Her cane suddenly felt heavier. "If this is pity, it is not pity." His words came out fierce with conviction. "It is recognition. There is something between us, something older and deeper than tonight's gossip or your sister's cruelty." Gianna's breath caught. The word he wasn't saying hovered between them like smoke, but he left it unspoken, letting the weight of it press down on her instead. You cannot mean I do. His fingers tightened gently around hers, warm and steady. He leaned closer, breath warm against her temple. Meet me on the eastern terrace at midnight, alone. There are things I must show you, things about your injury, about the night it happened, about why I have spent 3 years hunting shadows instead of brides. 1,000 questions burned on her tongue, at why her leg had never healed properly despite the best care, why certain dreams had plagued her since the accident, dreams of silver chains and a voice like thunder begging her to hold on, why, even now, the pain in her bones seemed to quiet in his presence. Gwen's voice sliced through the moment. Sister, darling, the king is far too kind. Do not keep his majesty from the proper dancers. Heath did not even glance at her. His eyes stayed on Gianna, steady, burning. Your sister forgets her place, he said softly, for her ears alone. But I will remind the entire realm of yours before this night ends. He lifted her hand and pressed a single, searing kiss to the inside of her wrist, right over the pulse that hammered like a war drum. Then he stepped back, bowed with perfect courtly grace, and melted back into the crowd, at leaving her standing there with fire racing under her skin and the entire ballroom staring. Gwen appeared at her side in a swirl, eyes glittering with fury barely masked as concern. What was that? Have you lost your mind? The Alpha King does not waste time on what? Gianna interrupted, voice steadier than she felt. On cripples? Gwen's laugh was brittle. Exactly. He will come to his senses by morning. Men like him always do. But as the hours crawled toward midnight, Gianna felt only the slow pull toward the eastern terrace. Questions multiplied with every tick of the great clock. What shadows had he hunted for 3 years? What did he know about the night her horse had thrown her in terror? And beneath it all, the deepest and most dangerous question of all, could a broken Omega truly be the fated mate of the most powerful Alpha alive? Or was this the cruelest jest the moon had ever played? Gianna adjusted her grip on her cane, took a steadying breath, and began walking towards the terrace doors. The terrace doors opened onto a hush of cool night air, jasmine vines heavy with bloom clinging to the stone railing. Heath was already there, cloak draped over the railing, black leathers molded to the broad line of his shoulders, as if he had been listening for the rhythm of her uneven steps since the moment she left the dance floor. He crossed the terrace the moment she appeared. When he reached her, he did not stop at arm's length. He offered his arm, palm turned up in silent invitation, the same steady gesture he had used before. Gianna hesitated half a heartbeat, and then she slid her fingers into the crook of his elbow. The moment they touched, warmth surged through the silk of her sleeve, easing the constant grind in her leg the way nothing else ever had. She exhaled before she could stop herself, a small, involuntary sound that hung between them. He noticed. Does it hurt less when I touch you? He asked quietly, voice low and rough at the edges, the rasp of a man unused to speaking gently. She kept her gaze on the moonlit path stretching below them, afraid that if she looked up, she might lose the last fragile thread of her composure. It shouldn't. But, yes. Heath said nothing for a long moment. Instead, he began to walk with her, matching his pace to hers, his arm a solid anchor that took just enough of her weight to make each step feel less like battle and more like breathing. Yet they reached the far end of the terrace, the only sound the distant splash of water and the faint rustle of leaves. Only then did he speak again, quieter still. Tell me, he said, gaze fixed on her. Do you ever dream of silver chains? Gianna's steps faltered. The cane dug into the stone as she turned to face him fully, fear sliding down her spine. How do you know that? Heath's jaw tightened. but he did not look away. "I know more than I should," he admitted, voice rough with something that sounded almost like regret. "I know the chains feel cold enough to bite. I know the voice that begs you to hold on sounds like thunder rolling through stone. And I know you wake gasping, reaching for something you cannot name." Gianna stared at him, the terrace suddenly too small, the moonlight too bright. Alarm coiled tight in her chest, as sharp and familiar, the same instinct that had kept her alive through 3 years of pitying glances and whispered cruelties. "No one knows those dreams, not even my sister. How?" Before the question could fully leave her lips, a sharp whistle split the air. An arrow buried itself in the stone balustrade inches from her shoulder, quivering. Heath moved faster than thought. One moment he stood beside her, the next his body was between her and the darkness, arms sweeping her behind him as a low, feral growl tore from his chest. Claws slid from his fingertips with a soft snick. His scent surged, pine and storm and something darker, protective. "Stay behind me," he ordered. Another arrow hissed past, this one closer, slicing a thin line across the sleeve of her gown. Gianna gripped the back of his leathers, while feeling the rigid tension in every muscle. She felt a strange heat bloom in her chest, as if something inside her wanted to rise up and answer the threat. Heath's head snapped toward the garden below, eyes glowing amber in the moonlight. "Show yourself." Silence followed, then the soft scrape of boots on stone as shadows detached from the hedges. 3 figures, cloaked and swift, bows already raised again. Gianna's breath caught. The warmth in her chest flared hotter, licking along her veins. For one dizzying second, the pain in her leg vanished entirely as Heath launched forward to meet the first attacker. The night erupted into violence, steel ringing, claws slashing, Heath's roar shaking the terrace stones. Gianna pressed herself against the railing, heart racing, the strange fire still flickering under her skin. Yet Heath moved like the storm he resembled, brutal, efficient, merciless. One attacker went down with a choked cry as claws opened his throat. The second tried to fire another arrow at close range. Heath shattered the bow with a backhand and drove his fist into the man's jaw with a crack that echoed off the stone. The third turned to flee. Heath was on him before he reached the steps, dragging him back by the cloak and slamming him face first into the railing. "Speak!" Heath snarled, voice vibrating with alpha command. "Who sent you?" The man only laughed wetly, blood bubbling at the corner of his mouth, before his eyes rolled back and he went limp. Poison. Gianna could smell it now, sharp, bitter, threading through the night air like venomous smoke. Heath released the body with a growl of frustration and turned back to her, as claws retracting with a soft snick that sounded far too loud in the sudden hush. Blood flecked the back of his hand, not his own. His chest rose and fell in controlled breaths, but when he turned to her, the storm gray of his eyes had gone soft. "Are you hurt?" he asked. He crossed the distance and cupped her face with both hands, thumbs sweeping over her cheekbones as though he could wipe away her fear. She managed a shaky nod. "No, just startled." Her lie tasted bitter. In truth, the strange heat still licked through her veins, warm and restless. She swallowed hard. "How did you know about my dreams?" Heath's thumbs stilled. For a moment, he simply looked at her, moonlight carving shadows across the hard planes of his face. Then he exhaled, a sound that carried the weight of 3 long years. "Because they are mine as well, and every night. The chains, the voice, the feeling that if I let go, something irreplaceable would shatter." His gaze dropped to her mouth, then back to her eyes. "I thought I was losing my mind until word reached me of your accident. After that, the dreams changed. They showed me your pain, and I knew I could not stay away any longer." Gianna's breath hitched. She searched his face for any flicker of deception, but found none. Only a quiet pull at the hollow place inside her she had carried since the day the stallion threw her. Before she could speak, footsteps pounded up the hidden servants' stairs. Heath's body tensed, shifting instinctively to shield her again. But it was only his own guards. 4 men in dark leathers, blades already drawn. Their captain took one look at the bodies and the blood on the king's hands and dropped to a knee. "Your Majesty, secure the terrace," Heath ordered, voice low and edged with command. "No one enters or leaves until I say otherwise. And send word to my private wing. Lady Gianna will be staying under my protection tonight." The captain's eyes flicked to her for the briefest moment, surprise, then careful neutrality, before he bowed. Heath turned back to Gianna, offering his arm once more. "Come," he said softly. "You're shaking." She was. She hadn't noticed until he pointed it out. The adrenaline that had kept her upright was draining away, leaving her leg throbbing worse than it had in months. When she took his arm again, the warmth returned instantly, dulling the pain to a lighter ache. She let him guide her through the narrow passage, the sounds of the ballroom fading behind them like a half-remembered dream. Yet they moved through dimly lit corridors reserved for royalty and trusted servants. Tapestries depicting ancient battles fluttered as they passed, and the scent of beeswax candles mingled with the sharper tang of pine that clung to Heath's skin. Every few steps he adjusted his pace to hers, never once making her feel hurried or pitied. The small kindness lodged somewhere deep in her chest. At the heavy oak doors to his private wing, 2 more guards snapped to attention. Heath gave them quiet instructions, then ushered her inside. The rooms unfolded like a secret kept from the rest of the castle, spacious yet intimate, with deep crimson rugs, a massive hearth already crackling with fresh logs, and tall windows overlooking the moonlit gardens. A large writing desk stood near one wall, scattered with maps and sealed letters, and in the adjoining chamber, she glimpsed an enormous bed draped in black furs, but Heath guided her instead to a low couch beside the fire. "Sit, please." She lowered herself carefully, cane leaning against the armrest. The firelight painted warm gold across his face as he knelt in front of her, close enough that she could feel the heat rolling off him in waves. "You have questions," he said. "Too many." Gianna's voice came out steadier than she felt. She studied the strong line of his jaw, the way his hands rested on his thighs, as though he were physically restraining himself from reaching for her. "You speak of shared dreams, like they're normal, when we both know it's not. And tonight, someone tried to kill me. Us, on your terrace. I want the truth, Your Majesty. All of it." "Heath," he corrected gently. She nodded once, throat tight. Yet he rose and crossed to a sideboard, pouring 2 glasses of deep red wine. When he returned, he handed her one and took the seat beside her. The fire popped, sending sparks dancing up the chimney. "The dreams began the day you handed me water. When your accident happened, the dreams turned violent. I saw the chains, I heard the voice, and I knew, without question, that someone had tried to take you from the world before you could become what you were meant to be." Gianna's fingers tightened around the stem of the glass. "Meant to be?" she echoed, the words tasting bitter. "A crippled healer who smiles politely while her sister mocks her?" "No." Heath leaned forward, elbows on his knees, voice dropping to that low, protective timbre that made her pulse stumble. "A woman who survived what should have killed her, but who still walks into rooms where every eye expects her to fall. That kind of strength does not go unnoticed by the old powers, Gianna, nor by me." The fire crackled again. Outside, wind whispered against the windows. She wanted to believe him, but 3 years of learning that hope was a dangerous luxury kept her spine straight. "What about the attack tonight?" she asked. His jaw flexed. "A warning, or a test. I've been hunting the one responsible for your accident. Tonight they reminded me they are still watching." He reached out slowly and covered her hand where it rested on her thigh. The warmth of his palm sank straight through her, easing the ache that had returned the moment they stopped moving. You are safe here. No one enters this wing without my direct order. My men patrol the corridors. I will patrol the gardens myself." She studied their joined hands. Hers looked small and pale in comparison, yet he held her as though she were made of something infinitely precious. "You speak as though my safety matters more than your own," she said softly. "It does." The answer came without hesitation. "It has for 3 years." Gianna felt the slow burn of his words travel through her chest, warming places she had long ago declared cold. She did not pull her hand away. A soft knock sounded at the outer door. Moments later, Heath returned with a tray with warm bread, cheese, sliced fruit, and a pot of fragrant tea. He set it on the low table before her. "Eat," he said, the command softened by the way his fingers brushed hers as he poured the tea. "You've had nothing since the ball, and your body has spent too long carrying more than it should." She accepted the cup, at the steam curling up to brush her face. The first sip bloomed across her tongue, chamomile and honey, soothing. "You notice everything," she murmured. "I notice you." He took the seat opposite, watching her with quiet intensity. "The way you favor your right side when you're tired, the way your shoulders tighten when someone mentions the accident, the way your eyes still carry fire even when the rest of you is exhausted." Heat rose in her cheeks, but she did not look away. "And what do you plan to do with all these observations, Heath?" A slow smile curved his mouth. "Court you properly, protect you fiercely, and when you are ready, ask you to let me carry more than just the weight of your steps." Gianna's heart gave a traitorous lurch. She could almost see it, the two of them walking through these same gardens at dawn, and his arms steady at her back, the world quiet enough that she might finally breathe without bracing for the next cruel laugh. The picture was so vivid it hurt. She set the cup down carefully, afraid her fingers might tremble and give her away. "That sounds like a lovely dream," she said softly. "But your kingdom will never accept it. They already see me as the broken daughter of a minor house. A limp and a cane are hardly the makings of a queen. They'll laugh louder than Gwen ever could." Heath was quiet for a moment, then he leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and spoke with the kind of calm certainty that made the air between them feel heavier. "I do not need their approval to know what I want, Gianna. I only need yours." The honesty in his voice cracked another piece of the armor she had worn for years. She looked down at her hands, at remembering how the strange heat had flared when the arrows flew. How, for one impossible second, the pain had vanished entirely. Heath seemed to sense the shift in her thoughts. He did not press. Instead, he rose, crossed to the tall windows, and drew the heavy curtains. "Rest tonight. My chambers are yours. I will take the outer room and keep watch." "You don't have to. I want to." He turned back, the firelight catching the silver threads in his leathers and turning his eyes to molten gray. "Sleep, Gianna. Tomorrow we will speak more, and I swear on everything I am, I will keep every promise I have made you tonight." She let him help her to her feet, his hand warm and sure at her elbow. At the doorway to the inner chamber, he paused, fingers brushing a stray lock of hair from her temple, with such care it made her chest ache. "Good night," he murmured. "Good night, Heath." The door clicked softly behind him. Alone in the enormous bed, furs soft against her skin, Gianna stared at the canopy above. Her legs still ached, but the memory of his touch lingered like a promise against her skin. Outside the door, she heard the faint creak of floorboards as he settled into his vigil. Then, so quiet she almost missed it, a low, contented rumble drifted through the wood, almost like a wolf settling down to guard its den. She smiled into the darkness despite herself. Whatever this was between them, it was already changing the shape of her world. And for the first time in years, the change did not feel like loss. Heath paced the outer chamber, boots silent on the thick rugs. Every few minutes he stopped at the tall windows, scanning the moonlit gardens below, their nostrils flaring for any trace of poison or unfamiliar scent. His claws itched to emerge again. The attack had been too clean, too bold. Someone wanted Gianna frightened. Someone wanted her isolated. "Mate safe," his wolf rumbled inside his chest, like an overexcited pup. "We guard. Tomorrow, lick her neck." Heath rubbed a hand down his face. His beast had no shame. He crossed to the heavy door separating their rooms and pressed his palm to the wood. No sound from within. Good. She needs the rest. He resumed his patrol, circling the chamber again. The bond between them hummed faintly, a golden thread he had felt since the day she handed him water. Back then, it had been a spark. Now it burned steady and bright, pulling him toward her with every breath. "Pretty, mate," his wolf murmured again. "Brave eyes, nice hips. Nibble her ear? She'll like it." Heath leaned his forehead against the cool stone of the mantel, letting the fire warm his back, while a reluctant smile tugged at his mouth. "Soon," he whispered to the empty room, "when she knows the truth." Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows like impatient fingers. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called once, sharp and lonely. Heath's senses stayed razor-sharp, alert for the slightest shift in the night air. But inside his chest, his wolf simply curled up with a contented huff, already dreaming of warm bread, rainy nights, and the soft curve of a certain Omega's neck. Gianna woke to the scent of fresh bread and brewed coffee. She sat up slowly, testing her leg. The pain was still there, a familiar companion, but muted. She dressed in the simple but finely made gown that had been left for her, deep forest green, yet practical, yet elegant, and made her way to the outer chamber. Heath stood near the windows, freshly changed into clean leathers, hair still damp from washing. When he saw her, the tension in his shoulders eased visibly. "You slept well," he said, a quiet note of relief in his voice. "Better than I have in months." She accepted the cup of coffee he offered, their fingers brushing. "Thank you. For last night." He inclined his head, but his eyes held hers a moment longer than necessary. "There is more to tell you, but not here. The castle has ears. I thought we might ride out, somewhere private. The old ruins by the river. No one will disturb us there." Gianna hesitated only a moment. The survivor in her weighed the risk, but the part of her that had felt the steady warmth of his touch won. "Give me a moment to steady my leg," she said, at Heath's mouth softened. "Take all the time you need. And Gianna?" He stepped closer, voice dropping to an intimate timbre. "If it hurts too much, I will carry you. No scandal required." A smile tugged at her lips. "Careful, Heath. I might start to believe you enjoy the idea." His eyes darkened. "I enjoy the idea of you trusting me enough to let me." The words settled low in her belly, sweet and dangerous. She turned away before he could see the flush rising in her cheeks, but she felt his gaze follow her all the way to the inner chamber. When she returned, he offered his arm again. This time she took it without hesitation. They left the wing under the watchful eyes of his guards and made their way to the stables. Heath led Gianna straight to his massive black warhorse, swung into the saddle with effortless power, and then reached down for her. "Both of us on one horse will be easier on your leg," he said simply, leaving no room for argument. Before she could overthink it, his hands gripped her waist and lifted her smoothly onto the saddle in front of him. He settled her sideways across his lap, her limp leg resting comfortably over his thigh. Her back pressed against the solid wall of his chest, surrounded by heat, pine, and the steady rhythm of his breathing. Heath wrapped one arm securely around her, gathered the reins with the other, and nudged the stallion forward. Gianna felt the powerful roll of the horse beneath them, and for the first time in years, The ache in her leg was secondary to the overwhelming awareness of Heath's body wrapped around hers. His breath brushed the top of her ear with every stride. As the ancient ruins came into view, stone columns draped in ivy and wildflowers, he slowed the horse and tightened his arm around her just slightly. "Ready for more truth?" he asked, voice low against her hair. Gianna leaned back into him, heart beating hard but steady. "As long as it comes from you." His smile curved against her temple. "Then let us begin." He guided her to a sun-warmed stone bench half hidden by blooming vines. When she sat, he lowered himself beside her, close enough that their thighs brushed. For a long moment, he simply watched her, thumb tracing idle circles on the back of her hand where it rested on his forearm. The touch was light, absent-minded, yet it sent slow, delicious sparks racing across her skin. "Last night we talked about your dreams. I think they point to something buried inside you. I don't have a name for it yet, only that every sign, every fragment I've gathered while hunting the one responsible, suggests you carried dormant blood, the kind that could change the balance of power in the realms if it ever woke fully." Gianna stared at him, waiting for the punchline. "I've never shown any power, not once. I'm just me." "You are more than you know." His thumb continued its slow circles on her skin. "I've been investigating, but the trails always go cold the moment they near your family's lands. Whoever arranged that accident wanted to make sure whatever lives inside you stays buried." She swallowed hard, the weight of his words pressing against her ribs. "So you've spent 3 years chasing shadows because of dreams?" "Because of you." The answer came without hesitation, simple and fierce. "I know someone out there fears what you could become, and I will not let them touch you again." A small, helpless smile tugged at her lips. "You are dangerously good at saying the right thing, Heath." His eyes darkened with quiet heat. "Only with you." They sat like that as the sun climbed higher, vines rustling softly overhead. Heath stayed close, offering the solid warmth of his presence while the bond between them hummed like a living thing, golden, insistent, pulling them closer with every shared breath. When her leg began to ache again from the ride, he noticed immediately. Without a word, he shifted, drawing her leg gently across his lap. His large hands settled on either side of her knee, thumbs pressing with careful pressure that eased the knot of pain. "Better?" he murmured, voice rough at the edges. Gianna exhaled shakily, the relief so sudden it brought tears to her eyes. She nodded, unable to speak for a moment. He kept working in silence, his strong fingers finding every tight muscle. The intimacy of it, the way he touched her as though her pain were his own, made something deep inside her chest unclench. "Soft leg," his wolf rumbled happily inside his mind, tail thumping with shameless delight. "We lick better. She'll make pretty sounds." Heath's hands stilled for half a second, a faint flush creeping up his neck. He cleared his throat. "Ignore him," he muttered. "He has the manners of a starving pup, and the brain of one too." Gianna's laugh surprised them both. "What does he say?" Heath's ears went pink. "Nothing appropriate for polite company." She arched a brow, the flirtatious tilt of it feeling new and dangerous on her lips. "Then perhaps you should translate later, when we're alone." His gaze snapped to hers, heat flaring bright and sudden in those storm-gray depths, that for a moment the air between them crackled, thick with promise and years of unspoken longing. He leaned in slowly until his forehead rested lightly against hers. "Careful, Gianna," he whispered, breath warm against her mouth. "Keep looking at me like that, and I may forget every vow I made about patience." Her heart stuttered, but she did not retreat. "Maybe I'm tired of patience." A low growl rumbled in his chest. His hand slid higher on her leg. "Then when the time comes, I will make sure you never have to be patient again." The moment stretched, electric and sweet, until Heath drew back with visible effort and helped her to her feet. "Come, let me show you something useful." He led her to a small clearing ringed by fallen columns and picked up 2 stout branches, handing her the lighter one. "Self-defense, adapted for your leg, and no fancy footwork, just balance and leverage." For the next hour he moved with her, patient, precise, never once letting her fall. He taught her how to use her cane as an extension of her arm, how to shift her weight to her stronger side, how to turn an attacker's momentum against them. Every correction came with a steadying hand at her waist or elbow. Every successful strike rewarded with a quiet, "good," that warmed her more than the sun. When she stumbled, he caught her against his chest. When she laughed at her own clumsiness, he smiled in a way that made her stomach flutter. When sweat dampened the hair at her temples, he brushed it back with his thumb, the touch lingering. "You're stronger than you think," he murmured during a brief rest, standing close enough that she had to tilt her head to meet his eyes. "All stronger than they ever let you believe." Gianna's breath came a little faster, not entirely from exertion. "Flattery? Truth." His gaze dropped to her mouth for a heartbeat before stepping back and gesturing to a weathered training dummy lashed to a post. "Try a strike. Full commitment. Use the cane like an extension of your reach." She adjusted her grip, focused, and swung. The strange heat in her chest returned and flared without warning. Silver flame, small, bright, burst from her palm and raced down the length of the cane. It struck the dummy with a whoosh. The straw and wood ignited in a flash of fire, burning to ash in seconds. Gianna gasped, the shock so sudden her leg buckled beneath her. Heath caught her before she hit the ground, arms locking around her as he dropped to one knee, cradling her against his chest. Yet his heart pounded against her cheek, fast and fierce. "You're not broken, Gianna," he whispered, voice raw with awe and something that sounded dangerously like fear. "You're waking up, and I'm terrified of what they'll do when they realize how bright you burn." She clung to him, trembling, the scent of scorched straw and pine filling her lungs. The fire inside her chest still flickered, warm and alive, as if answering the call of whatever slept in her blood. Then, from the direction of the castle, the faint sound of approaching horses drifted on the wind. Laughter, bright and familiar, cutting through the quiet like a blade. "Gwen." Heath's arms tightened around her protectively, but his voice stayed calm, meant only for her ears. "Stay close," he murmured. "Whatever comes next, you are not facing it alone." Gianna tensed in Heath's arms, or the lingering warmth of the silver flame still prickling beneath her skin. He rose smoothly, drawing her up with him, one hand lingering at the small of her back. Gwen appeared first, riding a sleek white mare, her silver gown from the ball exchanged for riding clothes the color of fresh cream. Her laughter died the moment her eyes landed on the blackened pile of ash that had once been the training dummy. Lord Valorant Kane arrived beside her. He was one of the men Gwen had been circling at the ball, tall, silver-haired, draped in immaculate dark green, his cloak catching the morning breeze like wings, the sort of effortlessly charming man who made courtiers lean in. "Gianna?" Gwen's voice pitched high with practiced concern as she reined in. "What in the moon's name happened here? It smells like a forge exploded." Lord Kane dismounted with grace, his gaze sweeping the clearing before settling on Gianna with polite curiosity. "Lady Gianna, Your Majesty." He offered a shallow, respectful bow. "We were out for a morning ride when we heard the commotion. Is everything well?" Gianna straightened, leaning lightly into Heath's side for balance. The heat in her chest had banked to a low simmer, but her legs still trembled from the shock. She kept her voice even. "A training mishap. Nothing more." Gwen's eyes narrowed on the ash, then flicked to Gianna's face, searching for weakness the way she always had. But today there was something new in her expression. curiosity edged with calculation rather than outright malice. She swung down from her mare and approached, skirts whispering over the grass. "You look flushed, sister. Are you all right?" Gwen reached out as if to touch her arm, then hesitated, letting the gesture hang between them like an olive branch. "I know yesterday was overwhelming. If you need to rest, I can escort you back." Heath's arm remained a steady anchor at Gianna's waist. "Lady Gianna is under my protection," he said, tone quiet but carrying the weight of royal command. "She needs no escort but mine." Lord Kane smiled, easy and warm. "Of course, Your Majesty. Forgive our intrusion. We merely wished to ensure no harm had come to anyone." His gaze lingered on Gianna a moment longer. "You ride well despite the difficulty, my lady. It takes courage to face the saddle after what you endured." Gianna offered a polite nod. "Thank you, Lord Kane. It is kind of you to say." Gwen's eyes kept darting between the ash and Gianna, at her usual sharp tongue strangely restrained. Heath's thumb traced one last slow circle on Gianna's waist before he released her, stepping forward to exchange brief pleasantries with Kane. The conversation stayed light, but Gianna felt the undercurrent of tension in Heath's shoulders. Gwen drifted closer to her, lowering her voice. "Truly, Gianna, if you need anything, you have only to ask. We are sisters, after all." The words sounded almost sincere, but didn't trust kindness from Gwen any more than she trusted sudden storms. Both arrived without warning, and both could destroy. The riders eventually took their leave, Gwen casting one last lingering glance at the ash before mounting her mare. Heath watched them disappear, then turned to Gianna, his expression softening the instant their eyes met. "Come," he said quietly, as offering his arm again. The ride home was slower. Gianna stayed nestled against his chest, the steady rhythm of the horse and the warmth of his body lulling the worst of her doubts into quiet. When they reached the private gardens behind the castle, Heath dismounted and lifted her down, but instead of releasing her, he carried her the rest of the way to a shaded bench beneath a blooming rose arbor. "You're tired," he said. He settled beside her, drawing her leg across his lap once more. His hands worked with the same careful pressure as before, thumbs finding every knot. Gianna closed her eyes, letting the sensation wash over her. "You keep doing this, and I might start expecting it." "Good." His voice was low, almost playful. "I intend to spoil you until you forget what it feels like to carry everything alone." Heath's fingers paused. "That fire with the dummy," he said softly. "It wasn't random. It answered when you needed it. We should train it. Together." Gianna opened her eyes. The idea terrified her and thrilled her in equal measure. "You think I can control something like that?" "I think you already are." He lifted her hand, pressed a slow kiss to the center of her palm where the flame had sparked. "And I want to be there when you learn how bright you can be." The next morning found them in the same private gardens, early enough that dew still clung to the rose petals. Heath had cleared a small circle of grass and set up a single straw target. He stood behind her, chest to her back, one hand resting lightly on her hip to steady her stance. "Breathe with the flame," he murmured against her ear. "Don't push it. Invite it." Gianna focused, feeling the now familiar heat coil low in her chest. When she released it, a thin ribbon of silver fire licked out and singed the edge of the target. Heath's arm tightened around her waist in quiet pride. Again. By the third attempt, the ribbon became a steady stream. Sweat beaded at her temples. Her leg trembled, but Heath's body behind her held her weight, and his breath warm and steady against her neck. Heath began courting her openly, without fanfare, but with unmistakable intent. Morning garden walks where he carried her when her leg tired, his arms strong and sure beneath her. One evening, after a quiet dinner in his private wing, where she spoke of the village children she once healed, and the tinctures she still mixed in secret. They slipped into a hidden alcove lined with jasmine. The scent wrapped around them, heady and sweet. Heath stopped, turning her gently until her back met cool stone. His hands framed her face, thumbs brushing her cheekbones with a tenderness that made her heart ache. "Gianna," he said, voice low and rough. "I have waited 3 years to do this properly." He leaned in, slow enough that she could pull away, but she didn't. Their lips met, soft at first. Yet then the kiss deepened, heat building like the fire she was learning to command. His mouth moved against hers with growing hunger, one hand sliding into her hair, while the other settled at the small of her back, pulling her closer until there was no space left between them. Gianna rose onto her toes, fingers curling into his shirt. When his tongue traced the seam of her lips, she opened for him on a soft gasp. Heath groaned low in his chest, pressing her more firmly against the stone, his body a wall of heat and strength. His wolf voice rumbled inside his mind, eager and shameless. "Sweet lips. Kiss lower. Want to hear her." Heath shut that thought down before it finished forming. His wolf, unbothered, simply circled back to the beginning. "Sweet lips. Kiss lower. I heard you the first time," Heath told it grimly, Ish breaking the kiss just enough to rest his forehead against hers. "He has no manners," he rasped, voice wrecked. "Absolutely none." She laughed softly, dizzy and flushed, her fingers still tangled in his shirt. "Then don't stop on his account." His eyes darkened, storm gray turning molten. He captured her mouth again, slower this time, savoring, as if he could memorize the taste of her forever. When they finally drew apart, lips swollen and breaths mingling, Heath pressed one last gentle kiss to her forehead. Gianna wasn't the only one falling. Lord Cain was spotted riding with Gwen on several more occasions, the pair of them laughing together in the gardens or sharing quiet conversations at court functions. The more time Gwen spent in his company, the softer her edges seemed to become. Her jealousy, once sharp as broken glass, then mellowed into something almost sisterly when she spoke to Gianna in public, small olive branches, invitations to tea, compliments on her growing confidence. Gianna accepted them warily, but the guarded part of her noted how Gwen's eyes still lingered on Heath whenever he was near. One afternoon, while Gianna and Heath shared a quiet dinner in his wing, Gwen appeared at the door with Cain at her side. "Sister," Gwen said, voice unusually gentle. "Lord Cain and I were talking, and I owe you an apology for the way I've spoken to you, for the ball, for everything. I was unkind. Jealous, I suppose." She glanced at Cain, who gave her an encouraging nod. "He's helped me see how unfair I've been." Gianna's fingers tightened around her fork. The words sounded sincere, yet something in Gwen's eyes still felt calculated. "Thank you," she managed, as Cain stepped forward. "And to make amends, I'd like to throw a small ball in your honor, Lady Gianna. Nothing extravagant, just the court. A chance for everyone to see the remarkable woman the king has chosen." Gwen agrees it would be perfect. Gianna's stomach twisted. "That's kind, but I'd rather not." "Oh, come now," Gwen pressed, laying a hand on her arm. "It would mean so much. Lord Cain has already made the arrangements. Say yes, Gianna. Let us celebrate you properly." Heath's hand found Gianna's beneath the table, a silent anchor. She hesitated, then gave a small nod. "If it matters that much to you." In the end, they wore her down with gentle insistence and the quiet weight of expectation. Gianna agreed, unease curling low in her belly like smoke. Hours before the ball was set to begin, as a messenger arrived with urgent news of unrest on the northern border, raiders testing the lines, villages calling for aid. Heath's jaw tightened as he read the scroll, but he kissed Gianna's hand before rising. "I must see to this," he said, voice laced with regret. I'll return as quickly as I can. Stay within the wing. You don't have to attend the ball." Gianna felt the old fear coiled in her chest, the fear of walking into a room alone, of hearing Gwen's laughter again, of being the broken thing everyone pitied. But something fiercer rose beneath it. She had faced arrows with him. She had summoned fire with him. She would not hide forever. "I'll go. I need to face it. On my own terms." Heath searched her face, then pressed a lingering kiss to her forehead. "Then hold your head high, my brave one. I'll be back before the night ends." The castle felt suddenly larger and colder without him. The night of the ball, the great hall glittered with crystal and candlelight, music swelling as nobles swirled across the marble. Gwen moved through the crowd like moonlight, silver gown catching every eye, laughing brightly beside Lord Kane. Gianna stood near the dais in a gown of deep midnight blue, silver embroidery tracing delicate patterns along the sleeves. Heath's absence weighed on her like a physical ache, but she kept her chin high, the cane steady in her hand. She had almost begun to believe the whispers were softening, that perhaps the court was learning to see her as more than the crippled daughter. Then Valorant Kane stepped forward, his voice carrying smoothly over the music as he addressed the gathered nobility. "My lords, my ladies," he began, his tone warm with concern. "We celebrate Lady Gianna's rising favor tonight, yet I would be remiss if I did not speak a necessary truth. Evidence has come to light, old letters, witness accounts from the night of her accident, that suggests the tragedy was not the result of a simple fall. It appears Lady Gianna's own latent, unstable magic spooked the horse, a power she has not yet learned to control, one that could endanger us all if left unchecked." A ripple of shock moved through the hall. Gwen's eyes widened in feigned surprise, her hand flying to her mouth. Gianna felt the blood drain from her face. "That's not—" Before she could finish, the strange heat in her chest surged uncontrollably. Silver flame licked along her fingertips, visible to everyone. The power roared through her, bright and wild, and her leg gave out. At the cane clattering to the marble as she stumbled forward and fell hard onto her hands and knees. The impact jarred through her bones, her gown pooling around her like spilled ink. "Look at her," Gwen cried, voice trembling with false pity that didn't reach her eyes. "Even now she cannot control it. Poor broken thing, crawling on the floor like the cripple she is. How embarrassing for the king." Humiliation crashed over Gianna. The entire court stared, whispers rising like a tide, some pitying, most mocking, all of them loud enough to drown her. Her leg throbbed viciously where it had twisted beneath her. The cane lay just out of reach, glinting mockingly under the chandeliers. Heat flooded her cheeks, her throat, her eyes. Tears burned hot as she felt the weight of every gaze pinning her down. She pushed to her feet, leg buckling again, and nearly sending her back to the floor. A soft, broken sound escaped her before she could swallow it. The laughter swelled. She fled. Through the side doors, down the dimly lit corridors. She limped until her lungs burned, until the grand hall was far behind her, straight into the shadowed gardens where the moonlight barely reached. Strong hands caught her from behind. "Easy, Lady Gianna," Lord Kane said, voice reassuring as he turned her gently to face him. "You're safe now. I saw what happened. The king's absence left you vulnerable, but I can help." Before she could pull away, darkness closed in. Something sharp pressed to her neck, a cloth over her mouth. The world tilted, then went black. When she woke, the first thing she felt was cold. Not the clean chill of night air, but something metallic that sank straight into her bones. As silver cuffs bit into her wrists, the same silver from her dreams, the ones where chains wrapped around her like living things, and a thunderous voice begged her to hold on. Gianna's breath hitched. This was it. She had dreamed this moment over and over, and now it was real. She was in a hidden chamber beneath what appeared to be ruins. Moss-covered stone walls, faint torchlight flickering across carved symbols she didn't recognize. The air smelled of damp earth. Lord Kane stood a few paces away, no longer the charming courtier who had smiled so politely at the ball. His silver hair caught the torchlight like polished blades, and his expression held the calm patience of a man who had planned every second of this for years. "You," she whispered, voice hoarse from whatever he had used to knock her out. "Me?" he confirmed gently, yet he stepped closer, tilting his head as he studied her. "You look surprised, Lady Gianna. Did you truly believe the king's sudden affection would protect you? That a few garden walks and whispered promises could erase what you are?" Gianna tugged at the cuffs. The silver burned colder the harder she pulled. "What is this? Let me go." Kane sighed, the sound almost pitying. "Still playing the innocent? Your silver flame was illuminating." "I had hoped the accident 3 years ago would finish the job cleanly, but apparently the blood runs deeper than I calculated." She stared at him, confusion cutting through the fear. "Accident? You spooked the horse?" "A small thread of dark magic," he said with a modest shrug as if discussing the weather. "Just enough to make the beast panic. I meant to end the last living vessel of the ether bloodline before your power could awaken and threaten everything I've built. Your mother carried it, you see, and now it's passed to you." Gianna shook her head, the motion making the cuffs bite deeper. "Ether blood? You're mistaken. I have no power. I'm just the crippled daughter who limps through life while her sister shines." Kane's smile was condescending, the way one might speak to a slow child. "No, my dear, you are so much more. The ether blood is ancient dragon blood, rare, potent, capable of purifying corrupted magic that has been poisoning the realms for centuries. It can heal, or it can shatter entire bloodlines. Your mother hid it well, but the moment I sensed it stirring in you, I knew you had to be removed." He stepped closer, crouching so they were eye level, yet his voice remained smooth, every word chosen like a scalpel. "Unfortunately, the power only went dormant instead of dying, so now I need you alive, just long enough to drain every drop of it. The ritual is elegant, really. The silver will keep you suppressed while I siphon the bloodline into myself." Gianna's breath shuddered out. The fire in her chest flared hot and bright, desperate to rise, but the silver chains clamped down hard, turning the flame to painful sparks that danced beneath her skin like trapped lightning. She gasped at the burn, tears pricking her eyes. Kane watched her struggle with clinical interest. "The king is miles away, chasing the border crisis I engineered so carefully. By the time he returns, you will be empty, and I will be unstoppable." He throwed like the storm he carried in his blood. Yet the border report had been a lie. Raiders that melted into mist the moment his forces arrived, villages that had never sent for aid. He had known it was a trap, but the realization came too late. By the time he turned his horse back, night had fallen, and the bond in his chest had begun to scream. Gianna. Her fear flooded him through the golden thread, sharp, suffocating, laced with the cold bite of silver. His wolf howled inside his mind, frantic and feral. Heath rode harder, the warhorse's hooves striking sparks from the road. Every league felt like a lifetime. He reached the castle at midnight, found the great hall still lit and buzzing with gossip about the unstable Omega, who had fallen to her knees in front of the entire court. Gwen's laughter still echoed in the corridors. He didn't stop to question anyone, yet he followed the bond like a beacon, straight to the ruins outside the city. The hidden chamber beneath the stones was exactly as the dreams had shown him. Moss-covered walls, torchlight flickering across ancient carvings. And there, chained in silver that drank her light, was Gianna. Kane stood over her, a silver dagger already pressed to the inside of her wrist, ready to begin the draining ritual. Heath's roar shook the chamber, He exploded through the doorway in a blur of black leather, claws fully extended, wolf surging so close to the surface that fur rippled along his forearms. Cain turned, startled for half a heartbeat, then smiled with genuine pleasure. "Your Majesty, right on time. I was hoping you'd witness this." Heath didn't waste breath on words. He launched himself across the chamber, claws raking toward Cain's throat. But Cain moved with surprising speed, sidestepping and slashing out with the silver dagger. The blade caught Heath across the ribs, the metal burning like acid where it touched. He snarled, pain only feeding his wolf's rage. Gianna struggled against the cuffs, silver flame flickering weakly at her fingertips before dying again. "Heath, run. He'll drain me and then come for you." "I'm not leaving you," Heath growled, circling Cain. Blood soaked his side, but he didn't slow. He feinted left, then drove his claws toward Cain's heart. The advisor blocked with the dagger, the silver edge slicing deep into Heath's forearm. The burn was excruciating, the metal suppressing his wolf's healing as it tried to knit the wound. Cain laughed fondly. "You see? Even the great Alpha King bleeds when the silver sings, and your mate—" He glanced at Gianna, whose fire sparked once more and guttered out, "is already fading. The chains are drinking her dry. Soon there will be nothing left but a pretty broken shell, just like the day I spooked her horse." Heath's next attack was pure fury. He slammed into Cain, driving him back against the stone wall. Claws raked across Cain's chest, drawing blood. Cain hissed in pain but countered with the dagger, plunging it into Heath's shoulder. The silver burned deeper this time, spreading ice through his veins. Heath staggered. The wolf inside him whimpered, strength leaching away. "Mate, can't reach. Too cold." Gianna cried out, yanking desperately at the cuffs. "Heath." Cain straightened, wiping blood from his lip, eyes gleaming with triumph. "You fought well, Your Majesty, but the ether blood was never meant for you. It was always going to be mine." He turned back to Gianna, raising the dagger to finish the ritual. The silver cuffs glowed brighter, sucking the last flickers of flame from her chest. Her head fell forward, auburn hair spilling across her face, the fire in her chest. It was gone. She felt empty, hollow. Just the girl who had fallen in the ballroom all over again. Heath lunged one final time, but his legs buckled. The silver poison spread fast, turning his blood to ice. He dropped to one knee, vision blurring, claws scraping uselessly against stone. Cain smiled down at him. "Watch closely. This is how empires truly fall." As the dagger made its final descent toward Gianna's wrist, something inside her, something deeper than the chains, deeper than the fear, snapped. At the golden thread that had hummed between her and Heath since the day she handed him water flared suddenly, white-hot and desperate. It poured every ounce of Heath's remaining strength into her, every promise he had whispered against her skin, every time he had carried her when she couldn't walk, every quiet, "You're not broken," he had pressed to her scars. Gianna's head snapped up. Her eyes met Heath's across the chamber, storm gray fading, but still burning with love so fierce it hurt to look at. She refused to let him die for her. With a scream that tore from the deepest part of her soul, Gianna wrenched against the cuffs. The metal groaned under the strain, cold biting deeper into her wrists. The silver held fast. She was going to lose him. The thought sliced through her sharper than any blade. Heath on his knees, bleeding, the light fading from those storm-gray eyes that had seen her when the rest of the world only saw a cripple. The bond between them flickered, weakening, thinning like a thread about to snap. She felt his pain echo through it, raw and desperate, mingling with her own terror until she could no longer tell where she ended, and he began. No. She refused. With everything she had left, every cruel laugh she had swallowed, every night she had cried alone, every time she had forced herself to stand when the world told her to stay on her knees, Gianna reached for the bond with all the stubborn survivor's strength that had carried her this far. She poured herself into it, every scar, every limp, every fragile hope she had dared to keep alive. The bond answered like a dam breaking. Golden light surged through her, fierce and pure, yet carrying the last of Heath's wolf strength in a roaring wave that flooded her veins. It met the silver chains with a sound like cracking ice, the metal screeching in protest as the two powers collided. The cuffs shattered. Silver fragments exploded outward like broken stars. The fire that had been suppressed inside her roared back to life, a torrent of pure silver flame that poured from her hands and wrapped around her like living armor. The pain in her leg vanished in the flood of adrenaline. Kane staggered back, eyes widening in genuine shock. Impossible! The chains should have... Gianna rose to her feet, wings of silver fire unfurling behind her for the first time, iridescent and magnificent. Yet she looked at the man who had tried to break her twice and spoke with the steady voice that had carried her through every cruel laugh and every lonely night. "You took 3 years from me," she said, flame licking along her fingers. "You don't get another second." She thrust her hands forward. The silver fire roared across the chamber in a blinding wave. Kane threw up his own dark magic, a shield of writhing shadow and poison, but the ether blood flame burned straight through it. The shadows screamed as they dissolved, unraveling thread by thread. Kane's scream followed, raw, furious, disbelieving, as the purifying fire reached the stolen power he had hoarded for years. It did not simply consume, it cleansed. The dark magic he had ripped from others, the fragments of corrupted bloodlines he had twisted into weapons, turned against him now. But the very essence he had stolen began to burn from the inside out, too much, too unstable, too foreign to his own body. He staggered backward, clutching his chest. Black veins spidered across his throat and up his jaw as the stolen power rebelled, boiling beneath his skin like liquid fire. His knees buckled. The silver dagger slipped from his fingers and clattered to the stone. Heath pushed himself up on one elbow, bloodied and swaying, but his eyes never left her. Pride and awe and love burned brighter than any flame. Kane collapsed fully, chest heaving, voice a broken rasp. "You were supposed to be nothing." Gianna stepped forward, silver flames dancing around her like a living crown. "That would make you blind." She did not strike again. She simply held the fire steady, letting it do what it was born to do, purify. Yet the stolen magic inside Kane continued to burn itself out, consuming him from within in slow, merciless waves. His skin blistered where the corruption met the cleansing flame. His eyes widened in genuine terror as he realized the power he had craved for so long was now the thing destroying him. "No," he gasped, reaching toward her with a trembling hand. "I was meant to rule." His words cut off in a choked scream. Kane's body convulsed once, twice, before going horribly still. When the fire finally faded, only a charred silhouette remained on the stone floor. The chamber fell quiet except for the soft crackle of dying embers and the ragged sound of two hearts learning how to beat together again. Gianna dropped to her knees beside Heath, hands shaking as she pressed them to the worst of his wounds. Yet the silver flame answered, gentle this time, healing instead of destroying. His gashes knit closed beneath her palms, the poison burning away like mist in sunlight. Heath caught her wrist, pulling her closer until their foreheads touched. "You saved me," he breathed, the words raw with awe. Gianna's breath hitched, tears slipping down her cheeks. The fire still flickered softly around her fingers, but doubt crept in now that the immediate danger had passed. "I don't know what I am anymore," she whispered. "What if this changes everything? What if I become something you can't?" "You already are everything," he cut in gently, cupping her face with blood-streaked hands. "Nothing about you could ever make me turn away. You are my mate, my queen, my fire, and I am endlessly proud of every flame you carry." The words sank into her like sunlight, as Gianna let out a shaky laugh that was half sob, leaning into his touch. Are you asking me to be your queen, Heath Valtor? Heath's smile was slow, devastating, and utterly certain. He shifted despite the pain, lowering himself onto one knee right there on the cold stone, never releasing her hands. I am. Not because of the blood in your veins or the fire you carry, but because you are the bravest, most magnificent woman I have ever known. Because every scar you bear only makes me love you more. Because I have waited 3 years to stand beside you, and I refuse to wait another day. Gianna Foster, will you marry me? Tears spilled freely now. She laughed through them. Yes, she whispered, then louder, fierce with joy. Yes, I will. Heath's breath left him in a rush of pure relief and wonder. He pulled her into a kiss, deep, yet desperate, and full of every promise he had never dared speak aloud until now. When they broke apart, his wolf voice rumbled faintly in his mind. Firemate said yes. We snuggle forever now. And maybe pups soon? Tiny fire pups with her pretty eyes? I lick them clean. Heath groaned quietly. He really has no filter. Even half dead, he's already planning the nursery. Gianna laughed again, and the sound wrapped around them both like the first warm day of spring. 6 months later, the world had begun to heal. Gwen had been exiled to a distant northern estate, stripped of title and favor, but not of life. Gianna had insisted on mercy, not for her sister's sake, but because she refused to let cruelty define the new reign. Gwen wrote careful letters now, stiff with regret and the slow work of learning humility, while whether she would ever truly change remained to be seen. Gianna no longer needed the cane, but she kept it anyway, silver runes etched along its length, a reminder of every step she had taken when the world told her she couldn't. She carried it with her when she walked the new halls of healing she had helped establish in the capital. Places where those with limps, scars, or bodies that did not move the way others expected could find tinctures, training, and someone who understood what it meant to be told you were broken. Heath watched from the edge of the yard, pride glowing in his storm-gray eyes. The kingdom still whispered about their queen's dragon roots, some with awe, some with lingering fear, but most had seen the good her power brought. No one dared speak against her openly anymore, and not when the Alpha King stood at her side like a living promise, and not when Silver Flame could heal as easily as it could burn. One quiet spring morning, she and Heath returned to the meadow where it had all begun years ago, the same sunlit field where a fearless girl had once handed a king a water skin and changed both their futures. Wildflowers swayed in the breeze. The old oak still stood, branches heavy with new green leaves. Heath spread a blanket beneath it and pulled her down with him, settling her between his thighs so her back rested against his chest. His arms wrapped around her waist, chin resting on her shoulder. His wolf voice, still simple and shameless, rumbled happily in his mind. Soft mate, warm sun, bite neck. She'll sigh pretty again. Heath chuckled against her hair. He never learns. Gianna laughed softly, at turning her head to press a kiss to his jaw. I hope he never does. Heath's hand slid beneath the hem of her gown, fingertips tracing the faint scars on her thigh with the same reverence he always showed them. Every limp, he whispered, every scar, every night you endured alone. It brought you back to me, and I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never have to endure anything alone again. Gianna turned in his arms, straddling his lap so she could look into those storm-gray eyes that had seen her when no one else would. She cupped his face, thumbs brushing the faint new scars he had earned fighting for her. I love you, she said simply. Wolf, king, stubborn heart and all. Heath's smile broke across his face. And I love you. Fire, strength, every beautiful fracture and every brilliant flame. He kissed her then with the quiet certainty of forever. The bond flared between them, golden and silver intertwining until the meadow itself seemed to glow. When they finally drew apart, something stirred inside Gianna's chest. A warmth spread through her shoulders and down her spine. Scales shimmered faintly beneath the skin of her arms for a heartbeat, iridescent and gone again before she could catch her breath. She gasped softly, eyes widening. Heath pulled back just enough to look at her, mesmerized. The awe on his face was raw and open, as though he were watching the birth of a star. "There you are," he whispered, voice rough with wonder. "My beautiful flame." Can you rate this story from 1 to 10? If you enjoyed this, I have lots more ad-free stories on my Patreon, including extended spicy chapters. Link is in the pinned comment.